2nd, 1935, a man checked into the Hotel President in Kansas City, Missouri. He signed the register as Roland T. Owen. He asked for a room without windows. The clerk gave him room 1046, a small interior room on the 10th floor. That was the last time anyone saw Roland T. Owen alive and unharmed. Over the next 3 days, Roland T. Owen barely left the room. He made no phone calls. He ordered no food. He spoke to almost no one. But he was not alone. On the evening of January 3rd, a bellboy delivering a message knocked on the door of room 1046. A voice called from inside telling him to come in. The bellboy entered to find Roland T. Owen sitting in a chair in near total darkness. The curtains were drawn. The lights were off. A man the bellboy did not recognize was standing in the shadows at the back of the room. The bellboy left quickly. He later told police the man in the shadows had stared at him without expression until he left. He said it was the most uncomfortable he had ever felt in his life. On the morning of January 4th, a maid entered room 1046. She found Roland T. Owen alive but in critical condition. He had been beaten severely, tied to a chair, and left to die. He was rushed to the hospital. He survived the night. But he would not identify his attackers. He would not give his real name. He would not say anything except that he was fine and wanted to be left alone. He died the following morning. He took every secret with him. The Kansas City police investigated for months. They could not identify Roland T. Owen. No one by that name existed in any records they could find. He had no luggage, no identification, no money, no personal belongings of any kind. He had checked in with nothing and died with nothing. The mystery seemed unsolvable. Then his mother saw his photograph in a newspaper. His real name was Artemus Ogletree. He was 17 years old. He was from Birmingham, Alabama. He had left home months earlier and told no one where he was going. His mother identified a scar on his hand, but even his identity created more questions than it answered. Why had a 17-year-old boy from Alabama checked into a Kansas City hotel under a false name? Who were the men in his room? What had he done or seen that got him beaten and left to die? Why did he refuse to identify his attackers even as he was dying? The case was never solved. No one was ever charged. The Hotel President still operates in Kansas City today. It has been renovated and modernized. It is a beautiful building. Room 1046 still exists. Guests occasionally request it. Some out of curiosity, some out of something they can't explain. The hotel staff will tell you that the room has an unusual atmosphere, a heaviness that the other rooms don't have, a coldness that the heating system doesn't account for. They will tell you that guests in room 1046 sometimes report sounds late at night, movement, voices, the sound of someone sitting very still in the darkness. The hotel staff will tell you all of this with a professional smile, and then they will ask if you would still like the room. Some people say yes. Those people always sleep with the lights on. On Christmas Eve, 1945, in Fayetteville, West Virginia, a fire broke out in the home of George and Jenny Sauter. George and Jenny had 10 children. They escaped with 4. The other 5 were never found. Their names were Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty. Ages ranged from 5 to 14. 5 children, gone in a single night, in a fire that the official investigation ruled accidental. George Sauter never believed it was accidental, and for the rest of his life, he believed his 5 children were still alive. Here is why. The fire started at approximately 1 a.m. on December 25, 1945. George and Jenny and 4 of their older children escaped through windows and doors. They called to the other 5 children. There was no response. George tried to go back inside for his children 3 times. Each time, something stopped him. The ladder he kept against the side of the house for emergencies was missing. It had been there the day before. It was gone. The water barrel he kept outside for exactly this kind of emergency was bone dry. It had been full the previous evening. He tried to use his truck to reach the upper floor windows. The truck wouldn't start. Both trucks wouldn't start. Trucks that had been working perfectly the day before. The fire burned with extraordinary intensity. By morning, nothing remained of the house except the chimney and the basement. A coal fire, investigators later said, burning that hot, that fast. Except the phone lines had been cut before the fire started. The fire investigator ruled the cause as faulty wiring. He also ruled that the 5 children's bodies had been completely consumed by the fire. Completely. To ash. Nothing remaining. George Sauter, who had worked in construction his entire life, knew that bodies do not burn to nothing. Even in the most intense fires, bones survive. Teeth survive. No bones were found. No teeth were found. No trace of 5 children was found at all. The fire investigator closed the case. Accidental fire. 5 children dead. George Sauter never accepted this. He put up a billboard at the end of his driveway, a massive billboard with photographs of his 5 missing children and a reward for information. The billboard stayed up for decades. He and Jenny drove past it every day for the rest of their lives, and the strange things kept happening. In 1947, a woman in a hotel in St. Louis reported seeing a group of children who matched the descriptions of the Sauter children. She said they were with 2 adult men who hurried them away when she tried to speak to them. In 1949, a woman in New York reported the same thing. In 1967, 22 years after the fire, Jenny Sauter received a letter. It contained a photograph of a young man in his late 20s or early 30s. On the back of the photograph were 4 words: Louis Sauter. I love Brother Frankie. Look into its. The photograph looked exactly like what Louis Sauter would have looked like as an adult. The letter had no return address. The postmark was from Kentucky. The family hired a private investigator to go to Kentucky and find the sender. The investigator went to Kentucky. He was never heard from again. George Sauter died in 1968. Jenny Sauter died in 1989. The billboard stood until it rotted and fell. The case was never solved. 5 children vanished on Christmas Eve, 1945 in Fayetteville, West Virginia. No bodies were ever found. No explanation was ever given. No one was ever charged with anything. And somewhere in Kentucky, in 1967, someone who signed himself Louis Sauter mailed a photograph to his mother, and then disappeared again. The Sauter children's case remains one of the most disturbing, unsolved mysteries in American history. Because there are really only 2 explanations. Either 5 children burned to nothing in a house fire and left no trace whatsoever, or 5 children were taken from their home on Christmas Eve and spent the rest of their lives knowing exactly where their family was and never coming home. In 2014, Derek and Maria Broaddus paid $1.3 million for their dream home at 657 Boulevard in Westfield, New Jersey. It was perfect. A 6-bedroom Victorian house on a quiet street, Good schools, safe neighborhood. The kind of house you spend your whole life working toward. They closed on the house on June 2nd, 2014. 3 days later, they received a letter. It was addressed to the new owners of 657 Boulevard. Typed, no return address. The letter introduced itself. My name is The Watcher. I have been watching 657 Boulevard for decades. My grandfather watched the house in the 1920s. My father watched it in the 1960s. And now it is my turn. Derek read it twice, then called the police. The police told him it was probably a prank. Old houses got strange mail sometimes. Don't worry about it. Derek tried not to worry. Then the second letter arrived. This one was longer, more detailed. The Watcher described the house in ways that only someone who had been inside could know. The layout of the rooms, the specific windows, the way the light came through the kitchen in the afternoon. Have you found what's in the walls yet? I put it there. It has been waiting for the right owner. Has the young blood arrived yet? I am waiting for the young blood. Young blood. Derek had 3 children. He stopped trying not to worry. The Broaddus family never moved into the house. They couldn't bring themselves to. They put it on the market and tried to sell it. Nobody wanted it once the story got out. They tried to demolish it and build 2 smaller houses. The town rejected the permit. They tried to convert it into apartments. The neighbors blocked it. For 6 years, Derek and Maria paid the mortgage on a house they never lived in. A house they were too afraid to enter. A house that was slowly draining them financially and emotionally. They sued the previous owners, who they later discovered had also received a letter from the Watcher before selling. The previous owners had said nothing. The case was dismissed. Derek had a breakdown. The marriage came under enormous strain. They eventually sold the house at a massive loss in 2019. But here is the part of the story that nobody talks about. The Watcher was never identified. The letters stopped when the Broaddus family left. No arrest was ever made. No suspect was ever charged. Whoever wrote those letters knew the house intimately, knew the family had children, had been watching the house for decades, possibly their entire life. And when the Broaddus family finally left, the Watcher went quiet, as if they had gotten exactly what they wanted. The house at 657 Boulevard still stands today. A family lives there now, a different family, with children, on a quiet street in Westfield, New Jersey. And somewhere, possibly nearby, someone is watching. As they always have been. As they always will be. In the winter of 1986, Alan and Debbie Tallman bought a bunk bed from a second-hand store in Horicon, Wisconsin. It cost almost nothing, a good deal. They had 2 young children and needed the extra bed. They brought it home and set it up in their children's bedroom. That night, everything changed. It started with the children. Their daughter, who was 7, began waking up screaming in the middle of the night. Not from nightmares she could describe, from something she couldn't. She would wake up pointing at the corner of the room, screaming that the old man was there, that the old man was watching her sleep. There was nothing in the corner. Then their son, who was 9, started sleepwalking. He had never sleepwalked before in his life. Every night, Alan or Debbie would find him standing somewhere in the house at 3 a.m., eyes open, completely unresponsive, standing and staring at nothing. Alan and Debbie told themselves their children were having nightmares. Kids had nightmares. There was nothing wrong. Then winter came fully, and the house changed. The temperature in the house dropped dramatically, and suddenly one evening in December, not gradually, not from a heating failure, all at once, like walking from outside into a freezer. Every member of the family felt it simultaneously. The family dog began barking at empty corners and refused to enter certain rooms. Debbie began seeing things. A small figure at the end of the hallway, a light in the garage when no one was there, a woman standing at the kitchen window looking in from outside. She told Alan. Alan told her she was tired, working too hard, seeing things. Then Alan started seeing things too. He saw the garage light on in the middle of the night. He went to investigate. The garage was empty, but the temperature inside the garage was even colder than outside, despite having no windows open. And in the corner of the garage, on the concrete floor, was a shape burned into the cement. He couldn't identify the shape. He didn't want to. Then the fire started. In February 1987, Debbie was alone in the house when a fire began in the garage. No electrical fault, no gas leak, no explanation. The fire department arrived and put it out. The fire investigator could not determine the cause. 2 weeks later, another fire. Same garage, same wall, same result, no explanation. And then came the night that ended everything. Alan came home late from work one evening. He parked in the driveway and got out of his car. He heard a sound from the garage, a low voice. He couldn't make out the words. He opened the garage door. What he saw in the garage made him run. He never described exactly what he saw. In every interview he gave afterward, he refused. He would only say that it was not human, that it looked at him, and that it told him something. He ran into the house. He grabbed his children. He grabbed Debbie. He put them all in the car in their pajamas in the middle of February. And he drove. They never went back. They left everything inside. The furniture, the clothes, their belongings, everything. Alan called a priest the following morning. The priest went to the house and would not discuss publicly what he found. He only said that what was in that house should not be disturbed. The bunk bed was eventually removed from the house and destroyed. The family that moved in after the Tallmans reported nothing unusual. Alan Tallman gave one interview about the events of that winter in 1988. He described the night in the garage as the single most terrifying moment of his life. He said that whatever was in that house had come with the bunk bed, and that when the bunk bed was destroyed, it left. He was asked what he thought it was. He said he didn't know. He said he didn't want to know. He said the only thing that mattered was that it was gone, and that his family was still alive to talk about it. Whether you believe Alan Tallman or not depends entirely on who you are. But the priest who visited that house never spoke about it publicly again, not once, for the rest of his life.